from political topics like the Palestine-Israel article or the abortion article, or it can range on very what seem trivial things like the definition of coconut milk on Spanish Wikipedia. We call ourselves a social movement. I would say that we have a mission. To this day, a very important, unbiased, neutral, and well-referenced source of knowledge. Each Wikipedia or each language Wikipedia is an independent project. Everything is pretty much human-powered. Not any editor can go ahead and edit the article of a Barack Obama, for instance. 100% of the money that comes to our projects are donations, just simply because of how colonialism worked and how languages got spread around the world. We oftentimes face situations where it's the Wikimedias in France that are taking over or like not seeing as notable of a source a newspaper that can be probably the number one reputable source in Nigeria, in English in that case, with something that is clearly notable there. If you're having a conversation over drinks with your friends and you manage to say, actually, well, this is how they work, so this is why you can actually trust it. It's not that anything can be there.
What is a wiki?
That is a fantastic question, and I think that
Hello, George. Hello. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
Amazing. George, for the record, can you please tell us what's your job at Wikimedia, and also what's your almost 10-year history at Wikimedia?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Andre. My name is Jorge Vargas. I am originally from Bogota, Colombia, but I live in San Francisco for the last almost 10 years that I've been working with the Wikimedia Foundation. Interestingly, I joined the foundation as a lawyer. I'm an attorney by training, so I was doing work around intellectual property, particularly trademarks and copyrights, with the foundation for almost a year, and then I got into the public policy space. But at the end of the day, one thing took to another, and an opportunity to start working on partnerships, and I'll explain that a little bit more, opened up. So I switched careers maybe around 8 years ago after being 1 year with Wikimedia. Currently, I am the director of partnerships for the Wikimedia Foundation. Partnerships is a team that works with stakeholders all around the world that range between governments, UN agencies, big tech, for-profit companies, nonprofit organizations, pretty much any person out there that wants to help us further our mission. And by that I mean help us bring Wikimedia projects in front of more people, help us bring more content into our projects, or help us support our volunteer ecosystem all around the world. All of this along, or as long as there is a alignment in our values and our mission, right? We want to make sure that we are working with the right kind of partners that support our value system, and that we share a similar vision in what we want to do.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. But just to be sure that we make that distinction, because it's a really important distinction, and I'm pretty sure that's a pretty big misunderstanding usually. So you work at Wikimedia, which is a little bit different from Wikipedia. Can you please help us understand the differences, and also what is a wiki?
Absolutely. So let's start with that, actually. Wiki is a technology that was built several years ago, 25 plus years ago, in which basically it's a web-based way to collaboratively build something between different people. So wiki actually comes from the term in Hawaiian wiki, which means fast. And that comes from the fact that you can very quickly update something that's on a wiki and that anyone can do it. So wiki is a term that can be used by any person that is building a wiki. Wiki, it's not something exclusive to Wikipedia or to Wikimedia. That's why you see things out there like WikiLeaks or WikiHow, things that are not part of the Wikimedia ecosystem. In such fashion, Wikipedia in English was created by a few volunteers, among them Jimmy Wales, our founder, even before the Wikimedia Foundation started. Wikipedia was just a group of folks that got together and came with the crazy idea of using a wiki to build an encyclopedia that every single person could contribute to. So the creation of Wikipedia, a few years later, 2 or 3 years later, the Wikimedia Foundation was created in order to support or be in the background of Wikipedia in order to be able to maintain all of the software, work on the fundraising, because as a charity, we work exclusively with donations. And in that sense, we called Wikimedia our, let's say, umbrella ecosystem of projects. So you can hear about the Wikimedia movement as that social movement that cares about free knowledge, that is basically working in their different projects. And I'll explain what projects means in a little bit. And then you'll hear of the Wikimedia Foundation as the nonprofit that is behind Wikipedia and its sister projects. So Wikipedia was the first wiki project that was created. So English Wikipedia started, and the same year, a lot of different Wikipedias started creating themselves. So we started growing our language base on Wikipedia, and then little by little, new projects started being added. So under the Wikimedia ecosystem, we have around 12 projects that are all wiki-based, and that are basically different ways to preserve or to save knowledge. Wikipedia is the most famous one, which is an encyclopedia, something that, interestingly enough, newer and newer generations are further away from the concept of an encyclopedia. I've been quite shocked to hear a lot of people that don't know what an encyclopedia is, but that's what Wikipedia is. But we also have things like Wikimedia Commons, which is a multimedia repository where a lot of freely licensed images, videos, audio files are saved. Actually, a lot of the pictures, audio, or sometimes video that you see on Wikipedia comes from Wikimedia Commons, but Wikimedia Commons is way more than that. It's a repository where you can get a lot of imagery that is freely licensed. There is Wikisource, which acts as a library of sorts. So if you want to upload a full book, a brochure, scans of old manuscripts, things that are not an encyclopedia article but are still bodies of knowledge, can be uploaded into Wikisource and later on either used by themselves or referenced to Wikipedia as one of the sources. And I'll finally mention Wikidata, which is a very important project, actually one of the newest ones, which is basically a language agnostic, open and free database that works in the backend, connecting all of the different projects into one thing. So by specific codes of what an entry is, Wikidata is connecting different things across projects, and that has been helping us really grow and interconnect all of the different Wikimedia projects. We have many more. So we have Wikinews, Wikiquote, Wiktionary, Wikiversity, but I won't get into all of them, but just to give you a general explanation of the distinction.
Just imagining how everything works must be quite daunting. But just to make sure that we are on the same track, so what Wikimedia has become, this body of preserving knowledge, sounds quite similar also to Internet Archive. Those are two very different things, correct?
Absolutely. So the Internet Archive is definitely part of the larger, let's say, ecosystem of free knowledge and folks that are working for an open internet. They're definitely partners, allies, and friends of ours. The distinction clearly is that the Internet Archive is in itself an archive, which it's basically saving bodies of knowledge that are already produced and are being archived, but online. whereas we are a place in the internet where knowledge is being built, it's being edited, constructed, created by the minute, by the second, in 300 plus languages that Wikipedia has, as well as all of its sister projects. So that's where there's definitely a distinction between those two. Um, Wikimedia, I think it's important also to note that we call ourselves a social movement in the sense that it is powered and enabled by hundreds of thousands of volunteers all around the world that devote their free time to the passion of creating, researching, curating, editing, and reviewing content that goes into our projects, as well as also very important subset of volunteer developers that are not necessarily working on the content itself, but in a lot of the technology that is used in our platforms.
That sounds fascinating. And I think it could be a great transition to also touch just a little bit on how Wikipedia specifically builds out its content. So just help me walk through how one can do an edit on Wikipedia, and how does the actual editing of anything on the website work? What's the process like?
Absolutely. So let me just start by saying that each Wikipedia or each language Wikipedia is an independent project. So the rules that may apply in English Wikipedia may be slightly different to the ones that apply to Swahili Wikipedia or French Wikipedia, but in essence, they all pretty much share the same corpus of editorial rules. The idea here is that Wikipedia is a wiki that anybody can edit. So you don't have to create an account. You can either edit anonymously, or just if you find something, you just click the edit button and you can add anything. There is a series of rules, though, which is what makes Wikipedia to this day a very important, unbiased, neutral, and well referenced source of knowledge. The idea behind Wikipedia is that as long as you're following rules such as creating articles or editing something around notable information. So, for example, not everything requires an encyclopedic article. I always use the example of myself, right? I'm not notable enough in the world to be on an encyclopedia. So, there shouldn't be a Wikipedia article about myself, right? But just as you would think of a traditional encyclopedia, things need to be notable and, in that sense, also verifiable, which means that there should be sources out there, published or online, that can provide references to the information that is being added into our projects. So we do not accept primary sources, for instance. So essays or blogs or things that I can just write about myself and then use as a citation, to use the same example, wouldn't work. But actually authorities or specific or entitled bodies of publication and sources need to be used to have that information verifiable. That's why for us, we have this tenet that we basically repeat ourselves of like citation needed. We always need to be able to cite what we're writing on Wikipedia. And in that sense, anyone can edit the encyclopedia as long as it's following the rules of notability, verifiability. And finally, I would add, although there are a little bit more, but I would add a third very important one, which is information being written in a neutral way. The idea of Wikipedia is that it's information that it's 100% written under a neutral point of view, which means that it's unbiased. So it's not using any kind of not information, but language that could be perceived as influenced or biased or trying to provide an opinion, but rather really focused on the facts. And yeah, as long as the editors are also treating each other with respect and civility and are engaging in discussions in a way that it's healthy and that is part of what we can maybe get into, how like this community of volunteers work simultaneously in projects, anyone can edit, no matter your background, your age, As long as you have a device, either a laptop or a mobile phone, you're good to go.
So do the citations actually have any tech stack behind in order to make sure that somebody walks through that? Is it a person that actually walks through the citation and reads in order to make sure that everything is clear according to the text?
Everything is pretty much human powered, right? Like, I
Wow.
think that the, I would say, magic of how this operates is that it's actually humans, although there's a technology component to like supporting those humans, volunteers that are working on it, but it is a lot of folks that are actually manually reviewing the fact that things that are added on Wikipedia are referenced to a citation. Sometimes it's not necessarily about reviewing the publication and actually looking into it, but you can, for instance, just say that there's ways in which you can know if that comes from a reputable source, if it comes from like a known journal, if it comes from a known
Mm-hmm.
publication or publisher. So it's not like that you have to read the entire book as a volunteer to know that that is actually being written, but you can assume, and I would actually talk about good faith here. You're also
Mm-hmm.
assuming that the edits that you're doing are being done in good faith. But that said, yes, there's bodies of volunteers which actually their job is not necessarily to write, but to review the content that is being there. And oftentimes that relates to personal interests, right? Like if I am an editor or a contributor that really care about cricket, I want to make sure that I am not just writing about cricket, but also like reviewing the articles on the cricket team that I love. And I want to make sure that the information is there correctly. So I'm using a very, let's say, trivial example, but at the end of the day, all of these things are human powered. That said,
Wow.
both Wikimedia developers and the Wikimedia Foundation build bots and technology that can help them
Mm-hmm.
support edits that are made on bad faith or what we call vandalism. So, for example, if I'm watching a football game and someone scores a goal against my team, and I just go to the Wikipedia article and write a lot of profanity there, like that, there are tools and mechanisms that can actually detect that in a quick and easier way, and that you're getting trained and trained to be able to detect this kind of thing. So that's the kind of support that both the foundation and Wikimedia
Mm-hmm.
developers also do in order to do this review that we were talking about.
Since it's all human powered, there are some instances when we simply won't agree with one another. There will be some moments when we won't agree on what the facts are. So whenever two people will be writing on the same article, there won't really be a neutral way since each side is taking their own side. How does Wikipedia make sure that those conflicts will get resolved?
That is a fantastic question, and I think that it's something of a model that sometimes I wish it was used in the world outside of Wikimedia. But basically, how it works is that whenever you see a Wikipedia article, you'll notice that there
Mm-hmm.
is attached to it what we call a talk page in English, which is basically a discussion forum where volunteers can actively discuss what is being in the main article. So there, that is a space where people can contradict each other, provide their arguments, find ways in which something is maybe challenged or written in a way that people are not agreeing with, and the discussion take place until something called consensus, which is something very specific to, and I
Mm-hmm.
say consensus in a very Wikimedia way, like there's a specific way to reach consensus, is achieved in order to resolve a lot of these challenges. There are also certain hierarchies in which there are what we call admins. In other
Mm-hmm.
languages, they have a different name. For example, in Spanish Wikipedia, they're called bibliotecarios, which is the word for librarians, but in English, the word
Mm-hmm.
admin, which is a editor that has, let's say, a more reputation after more amount of time, more amount of edits, that has a more not rules, but that has more authority to resolve certain things, or, for example, to block the edition on certain articles. Not any editor can go ahead and edit the article of a Barack Obama, for instance. That is an article that is protected, and that only certain editors with certain amount of reputation can go in. So this controversies or these discussions can vary from political topics like the Palestine Israel article or the abortion article, or it can rage on very what seem trivial things like the definition of coconut milk on Spanish Wikipedia, which can be very different from folks in Spain versus folks in other Latin American countries. So all of that, the idea is that at the end of the day, the Wikipedia article is representing all of the different perspectives as long as they're factual. So for instance, you'll see articles where you're seeing, well, according to in this country, this is this, but in this country, this would mean something different. And the different perspectives are being there, and that's a way to reach consensus, for instance. But going back to the talk page, it is the talk page where um, our volunteers or people that want to really engage into what goes into the main page will interact and resolve the conflicts. And just to note that we in the foundation have absolutely nothing to do with that. We are completely away from the content. We just allow our volunteers to work on the content. We're basically just behind the scenes providing the infrastructure for that to happen. So we're not out there resolving conflicts around content or what is known in the Wikimedia world as edit wars, which is like this back and forth of deleting and adding, deleting. That's something that we're not engaged in.
What you just said last makes me remember something. So you said that Wikipedia doesn't have anything to do with the content wars. But I do remember an episode from Half of This Interesting talking about something called the Wikipedia Supreme Court. Obviously, since Wikipedia is just a not-for-profit and it doesn't go out into the real world to solve its cases, it has to have some system in place when editors actually escalate and escalate and escalate. At some point, somebody has to step in and decide what this article is going to say at the end of the day, since there's changes over changes over changes over changes. Is that actually a thing, the Wikipedia Supreme Court? And if so, how does it work with all of the different projects with the different languages?
I don't know if I would call it a Supreme Court of sorts, but I guess that to my point, I was referring specifically to the Wikimedia Foundation, us as the nonprofit. We don't intervene in the content. There's very little exceptions when there's things just related to very strong legal or security issues where like there are very, very little instances where we would have an opinion on. But the Wikimedia ecosystem, and particularly in Wikipedia, the volunteers are actually the ones that are resolving their conflicts and have different levels of hierarchy. So there is indeed an arbitration committee that is also volunteer run. Organizes, right? So this arbitration committee, it's pretty much like a binding dispute resolution panel of editors. So because there could be some things, ARCOM is generally addressing misconduct of the administrators and the editors, but at the end of the day, it all is volunteer run.
But in this light, given the editors and the fact that every single article on Wikipedia will very likely be ever changing. So if I check it today, it's going to be very likely different from how it's going to be in 2 months or 2 days even. I vividly remember even at the early 2000s when I was in school in a small city in Eastern Europe, in not even in just one random school that we were taught not to use Wikipedia as a source. It's fairly obvious why, but can you just please explain why does Wikimedia, why does academia treat Wikipedia as a non-appropriate source of information?
I think that the misalignment, or maybe the assumption, is the fact that because anyone can edit, you shouldn't trust
Mm-hmm.
what's on Wikipedia, right? And I think that sometimes academia is missing on the actual editorial process that go behind Wikipedia. And as time passes, actually, I think that myth has been little by little getting debunked, not only by scientific research that looks at Wikipedia articles and compares them to scientific or even medical articles and realize that they're as accurate as any other publication out there, but also understanding the process that goes behind building a Wikipedia article and seeing that Wikipedia is actually being reused by big part third parties out there
Mm-hmm.
as a reliable source of information. And I would add that even nowadays, Wikipedia's accuracy and verifiability has given even more power to the internet in general to see Wikipedia actually as a source of truth because it's
Mm-hmm.
unbiased, because it's neutral in comparison to a lot of information that is now out there. Anyone can just now be a content provider. A lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation is out there. But I would say that at the end of the day, personally, but also as an organization, what we try to bring to not just the academic sector, but anyone, is that you should never just believe what it's written online by itself, right? Like, even if it's Wikipedia, even if it's Encyclopedia Britannica, even if it's a newspaper, even if it's a blog, it's always good for you to check your references, check your sources, cross reference with what you're reading with something else, because the accuracy on Wikipedia is not 100%, is very high, and it really depends also on the language that we're talking about. Larger
Yep.
Wikipedias like English, French, Spanish, Dutch, German, their accuracy is very high because there's a lot of volunteers out there that are actually working on the content. But smaller Wikipedias that have a fewer number of volunteers cannot work just because they don't have the human power to go through the mistakes or go through the revision as quickly as the others. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and that is where people would like get the mistake, screenshot it, and then say like, "Oh, Wikipedia is doing everything wrong," and actually, in a matter of minutes, that kind of like inaccurate fact or inaccurate information is reverted. Mm. But those sometimes tend to be like the things that you see on news cycles, like Wikipedia said this, and it was just a screenshot of something that was later corrected. But all in all, I would just repeat myself by saying that we really encourage the academic sector or anyone out there that you should always cross-reference what you're reading, what you're listening to, what you're watching, right? Like you cannot just make TikTok, YouTube, Wikipedia, or anything your unique source of knowledge. It's always good to cross reference
Absolutely.
and get different sources to get informed.
Absolutely, and obviously there's the citations in every single article, so that's obviously one source that should be read every single time, and it has to go through each individual's filters and actually assess our stance on what is being written and our understand and go through our understanding of the world. Just to go a little bit deeper into this conversation of education and academia. In this universe of Wikimedia, there's also the Wikiversity. And I have to just wonder, what role does Wikimedia play, especially in a world where universities are sometimes inaccessible or harder to access? How what's the interaction between universities and Wikimedia as a whole?
So universities, physical universities, work with Wikipedia in a lot of different ways, right? Like there
Mm-hmm.
is um, academics and professors that actually encourage their students to write Wikipedia articles. We actually have programs run by our chapters or by user groups, which are basically, let me quickly give a step back and define
Mm-hmm.
that our volunteers sometimes are self organized in what we call affiliates, which is a range of chapters that are usually by geography. So there's Wikimedia Germany, Wikimedia Colombia, Wikimedia Indonesia, etc. User groups that can be either linguistic, thematic, or also regional or geographic. And then there's thematic organizations. There are groups out there like the EduWiki user group that's out there
Mm-hmm.
working with the academic sector to like train them or help them run wiki workshops in universities or in schools to learn folks how to use Wikipedia, edit Wikipedia, find the value of Wikipedia into the classroom. The Wikimedia Foundation also has an education team that runs different programs or different projects around the same. And universities in general, I think that there's a lot of professors out there that actually see Wikipedia as a great source for you to instead do your academic research and spend all this time writing a paper and then printing it and putting it in a drawer, but rather having that information being published in a Wikipedia article and actually contributing to that body of old knowledge by the research that you did. So that is a way in which universities are engaging. You did mention Wikiversity, which
Mm-hmm.
is a wiki project, part of the let's say ecosystem that we're talking about. But Wikiversity in itself is a project that it's devoted to in a wiki way, so utilizing the wiki technology, creating and it's pretty much devoted to learning resources, learning projects, research of all levels, types, and styles of education, professional training, and formal learning. So how you can use Wikiversity is to look, for example, for materials that can be used in the classroom, for curriculums, for ways in which teachers can actually like use these different academic sources or academic materials into their classrooms. But that is pretty much how it would go.
That's all sincerely fascinating, and I have many, many more questions to ask. But first, I think it would be helpful to maybe transition just a little bit into this conversation of um, interests, because obviously volunteers come to Wikipedia because they have an interest. They are, well, dare I say, a nerds on a particular topic, and they really care about the public knowledge that is out there on that specific topic, which is amazing. But when it comes to for-profit companies, it's fairly simple to know what their agenda is: to make money. Uh, when it comes to not-for-profits, that agenda is a little bit muddy. So I'll just ask straight out, what is the agenda of Wikimedia?
I don't think that we have an agenda, to be frank. I would call it actually, instead of using the word agenda, which sometimes can be a little bit charged as a term, I would say that we have a mission and we have a vision.
Mm-hmm.
And the vision of Wikimedia is to have a world in which every single human being can share in the sum of all knowledge, right? And under that vision, what we try to do is to incentivize and create the spaces, both in a technology way, but also in a programmatic way, to facilitate that and achieve that pretty ambitious mission of having a consolidation of the sum of all knowledge, right? And I say ambitious because the sum of all knowledge can mean different things to different people. We can get here on debates of actually what knowledge means.
Oh yeah.
Oftentimes, Wikipedia is a source that is pretty much associated to education, but you can find on Wikipedia and on Wikimedia projects things that are not necessarily part of the education, right? Like we have projects around film, sports, any kind of topic and any kind of information. So, what means knowledge and what is the sum of all knowledge is one thing. So again, I think that at the end of the day is the vision that we work and push in order to make sure that we can have more and more information in more languages that is relevant for more and more people, and that they see the value of not just reading Wikipedia or using Wikimedia projects, but that they also see the value of contributing to the projects in order to represent their local knowledge, their local content, because it is a place where you can work to save your local language that is disappearing, and you want to make sure that that information is being saved and consolidated. Or it's a space where you can make sure that your culture is properly represented and seen by other folks around the world, just because of the exposure that having a Wikipedia article about the folkloric dance that you do in your local community, right? And it's well documented and has the proper citations and references can be added there. So that is our vision, the idea to really empower a way in which the world can just be part of this corpus of knowledge.
It sounds like an absolutely lovely thing to want in the world, but yet I just want to push a little bit on that. We have this phrase in social networks, there's this phrase, follow the money. You need to see where the money flows in order to just properly assess who is actually sharing their interests and from where is actually the money coming. Just help us understand with a pie chart maybe, or whichever way is more appropriate from your standpoint. How is the money that Wikimedia uses, where does it come from? What percentages from where?
100% of the money that comes to our projects are donations. So,
Wow.
and that's something that will never change in the sense that since its inception, we've wanted to make sure that the bias and the neutrality of Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects were protected no matter what, right? Like we could be running ads on our website and make 100 times the money that we make on donations. And actually, and maybe you have experienced this already, you will see a call to action to donate to Wikipedia. And it's actually through that call to action that we make over 80% of our donations. Donations that can range from $1, $5, $10 to major gifts that folks just feel like contributing larger amounts of money to our cause. And I would say that in average, we're talking about donations between $15 per person that built a 80% of the pool of money that we are fundraising every year. As I mentioned, we also received gifts from larger organizations, larger funders, some in the private sector, some in the basically just regular families or folks that want to provide large donations to our cause. And that is kind of like a different kind of donor, let's say, than the average person that comes through a banner or donates through an email that we sent them, just making a request or making an ask for a donation. And in addition to that, we recently launched a different revenue generation model that is very specific to companies or any kind of organization. But at this point, our clients have been tech companies that are using our free knowledge to run their work. So I'm talking about a project called Wikimedia Enterprise, which is a separate, outside of the for-profit, so a separate LLC, that it's actually building a different pipeline that provides a direct entry level with customer service to third parties out there that want to pay for a better way to access all of the information. So we're not, let's say, selling the information that it's for free. I mean, anyone can go and take any API from Wikimedia and build their own app, even for commercial purposes. But one of our clients, for instance, which is Google, has been absorbing all of the APIs, all of the information out of Wikipedia in order to like bring back those informations on Google. And instead, they'd rather become a client of Wikimedia Enterprise and pay an amount of money in order to have like a more organized and customer service oriented support, instead of them having to parse through all of the APIs, parse through all of the information, put a lot of engineering work, but rather have us do that. So Wikimedia Enterprise is a quite recently launched revenue generation model. It's been there. I think that we made the first announcements this year, although we've been working on it for a bit. And it's just a different way. Definitely our big way, or like the big majority of the influx of how we build our budget is thanks to donors from all over the world that want to contribute to our mission.
Now, I think it would be an appropriate moment to say that if you didn't get a banner with donate to Wikipedia, now it's your call to action. If you're listening to this, just go to Wikipedia and donate whatever you feel is appropriate. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've used it at least 5 times in your lifetime, and it's been worth the money. Just do it. It is worth it. But on this note, since Wikimedia as a whole is, well, dare I say, a digital common, a digital public good at the end of the day, how can we, as individuals, make sure that it stays that way, and what can we do to help out in the efforts of Wikimedia?
So that's a great question, Andre. I think that first of all, I think that there is indeed that way, and I appreciate the call to action that you just made. Just donating to a cause is a way that you are directly supporting the movement and supporting the infrastructures that are running behind it, not just from a technical perspective, but also from an advocacy perspective, that we can continue as an organization to fight censorship, to fight legislation that can be harmful or that can be attacking our knowledge projects, that we can continue our work to defend Wikimedia projects and defend free knowledge from regimes or legislation out there that is trying to block Wikipedia or the ways in which people are using Wikipedia. And secondly, and I think that this is a more casual way, it's always good, if you're listening to this, to just be able to share what I'm sharing with folks. Not everyone knows that Wikipedia is a nonprofit. Not everybody knows that there is a foundation behind it supporting it. There's a lot of confusion between what Wikipedia and Wikimedia is, which is absolutely fine and absolutely fair, right? Like, and that's why my job and the job of many others is to help just share and be understanding for folks that they're like, oh, but anyone can edit. You shouldn't trust Wikipedia. If you're having a conversation over drinks with your friends and you manage to say, actually, well, this is how they work, so this is why you can actually trust it. It's not that anything can be there. That is already helping our cause. That is already bringing awareness to how things are being organized and how things are being done and how our movement can continue to grow.
That's amazing. And on this podcast, we have a tradition. Before you leave, I have to ask this thing. If you could remove just one boundary from your ecosystem, which one will it be and why?
That is a really great question, and that's something that can get a little bit political, in quotation marks, which Wikipedia was created with a perspective that can be seen as privileged, in the sense of a perspective of what education or knowledge or information is from a very Western way, right? So for us on Wikipedia, a trusted, verifiable source would be a book, would be a journal article with certain reputation. But if we really want to be the sum of all knowledge and actually do something that we call, or achieve something that we call knowledge equity, which is one of the 2 pillars in which our strategy towards 2030 is built upon. Didn't talk much about that, but we have been and are undergoing a large movement-wide strategic process to where do we want to be in 2030. And one of the two pillars for that, one being knowledge as a service, the second one being knowledge equity, is to really dismantle and address all of the barriers, political, economical, cultural ways in which knowledge is being trapped just by the paradigms of what we think knowledge is. So, to give you a very concrete example, oral knowledge, which is, as you may know, a very important way in which a lot of different cultures transmit their knowledge, is not something that currently can be used or cited on Wikipedia as a source that is verifiable. At the same time, if we want to be the source of all knowledge and the sum of all knowledge, we need to reconsider what are the ways in which we can look at knowledge. The problem with that is that it definitely gets there in the, again, that's why I call this political, like conversation of why would a book have more power or more authority than a oral history recorded by the lead of certain community that has used oral knowledge and oral traditions to preserve their knowledge and culture. So that is a rule that I would change, cognizant that it's a controversial one in the sense that we have very strict editorial policies, and that has been actually the way in which the encyclopedia has maintained its status and its reputation and how it works. But at the same time, I think that it's important for us to evolve a little bit more outside of this traditional, maybe white male Western ways to look at knowledge and think of other ways in which knowledge can be part of our projects. And it's something that we're working very actively on to make sure that things are not, let's say, reverted or contradicted by groups or populations that are or have been historically marginalized or oppressed. Just to give you a very quick example, just because of how colonies worked, oftentimes African communities that are writing articles in French Wikipedia about things or information or folks that are notable in these countries can sometimes get deleted or get reverted by Wikimedians in France or other examples like with Spanish or with English, just simply because of how colonialism worked and how languages got spread around the world. We oftentimes face situations where it's the Wikimedians in France that are taking over or like not seeing as notable of a source a newspaper that can be probably the number one reputable source in Nigeria to, and I mean, Nigeria is a bad example with French, but like in English in that case, with something that is clearly notable there. So how can we address this challenges that are preventing us from knowledge equity is something that I really want to continue to work in, and that within my role in partnerships and within the way in which the organization looks at things are really trying to find ways to address to properly achieve the sum of all knowledge as our vision statement identifies.
I'm just deeply grateful that you are working actively on this. I'm deeply curious to see how you'll evolve over the next years as an organization and how you will tackle knowledge equity. And I'm sincerely grateful for this conversation. It was way more insightful than I could have ever hoped to be. And it was just an amazing experience to learn more about Wikimedia. Now, the very last question, where would you like to send people?
The number one place would definitely be just go to wikimedia.org, right? If you want to just navigate through our different projects. But if you want to learn more about how you can donate to our platforms, you can either go through the donation links that are on Wikipedia or Wikimedia projects, or you can go directly to donate.wikimedia.org, which is the landing page where you can learn how you can donate in your own country. And finally, if you want to learn more about what the Wikimedia Foundation is working on and how we are actually operating you can go to wikimediafoundation.org, which is the place that you can learn more. And of course, if you want to follow us on social media and at Wikipedia or at Wikimedia, you can get more and more information and news about what our wonderful communities around the world are doing, learn about projects, learn about programmatic activities, and just also just keep yourself more in the know of what this magical, crazy, and interesting ecosystem is.
We'll be sure to have all of those links linked down below. Jorge, I thank you so very much for being here. And to those listening, until the next time, stay connected, internet people.
You've been listening to the Audacious Ecosystem, the show where we learn together what it takes to make an ecosystem great from the leaders in the organizations around us.